Welcome to the Double D podcast with your host, Double D.
So is it reasonable to assume that a lot of his udasis were also kind of in a way a business trip? Like, meaning he'd be going to...
No, not really.
Okay.
And the reason being, I'm going to share a story, and in this story, you're going to see the sequence of events as per that story, because this was written at the time. Guru Harai could have, if you think about it, according to Sikhs, the seventh Guru would have been the same light as the first Guru. But just him being the person who's sitting on that seat of power, he could have changed this. He could have asked for this to be changed. But this is how Guru Nanak was seen. So he was considered a Modi as a person, because that was his, and not to be confused with the current Prime Minister of India. It's just he was a granary person. That's what the name Modi meant. He was deemed to be a dervish who believed in Ittihad and denied Hulul. Again, this is from a Persian source. A dervish is someone who had the mystic spirit come over him. Ittihad meant that he believed that you didn't need an intermediary to experience oneness. And Hulul means he doesn't believe in the descent of God into man. As a theological standpoint.
Would that be synonymous with Avtar?
So,
the Avtar concept?
The Avtar concept has become that, but what Guru Nanak says is, it's that oneness which is manifested, not that oneness manifesting into somebody. That's why the term...
Say it again, that's very important. Very key.
It's that oneness that has manifested, not that oneness manifesting into a special person.
Very interesting.
Guru Arjan Sahib's Barney, and I can share with you, this is the stuff that nobody wants to ever say. He'll say, anybody who says I'm God, consider themselves cursed. What he meant by God is the all-being, all-creator, all-omnipotent. He's referring to whatever concept, but if I go into it next time, I'll give the context of which quality of that oneness.
So when you say oneness manifested, you mean the creation?
Yeah.
Like the universe?
So it's like this. I was thinking about this. I'm like, how do I describe this? Right now, we've got this mic between us. But think of this. Let's just say we were all on ships. And we were in the middle of the ocean. And there's one island we're all trying to get to. And we try to get to it from all different angles. What are we going to see? We're all going to see that lighthouse. But reality is, that's the thing. That's our destination. But we're all still part and parcel of the same experience. We all see the lighthouse, although we're aware of the existence of everything around us. It's the same type of thing.
Interesting.
There's an attestation to that oneness, but a knowing that that thing is on the same journey as I am, coming from a different way. Okay. So, an incident occurred, a very famous one, where Guru Nanak started giving grains to everybody, saying, Bera, Bera, Bera.
Yeah, that's right.
Which means yours, yours, yours. According to Dabastan, Daulat Khan Lodi was shocked because Guru Nanak was a trusted granary officer, and he came highly recommended from his brother-in-law, who's from a very affluent family, and they also knew that Guru Nanak's dad was also from an affluent family. So it's almost like, you're from our administration, you're one of us. What are you doing? But he said that he was ready to punish him, but then realized that the mystical spirit came over him and said, okay, I'm not going to do anything.
Oh, wow.
Now, why is this interesting? Why, for me, is this more believable than the story that we normally hear? The reason is, at that time, in India, during Mughal rule, during Pathan rule, during all those rules, what they felt was that if anybody who was deemed to be saintly comes by and you spill their blood, they're going to come after you as a ghost. So they used to be scared. And a lot of stuff was able to get, if you wanted to get something, a message through, let's say you and I are from different kingdoms, but we're, obviously, if we had one overlording power over us, they wouldn't want us to collude. So they'd make sure that they put every stop in there. The only people who could get through were actually the saints, or sadhus, or people who seemed to be mendicants and people of God. They said Nanak was known to take austerities. he reduced his food. Then he stopped his food and only took milk. Then he stopped his milk and only took ghee. And then he stopped that and he was known to be Bhavanhari, which meant that he subsisted on the air.
That says that in that account?
Yes. That's so different from what anybody's heard. And the question comes, they do mention in this account that Guru Nanak stopped eating meat. But the thing is, it was saying that there's a potential that he possibly did eat meat. Now, those people who impinge their faith thought what you eat and what you don't eat might find this offensive. This is another view that's there. Because they also talk about how later on Sikhs did take to eating meat, right, at a different point. They mention a story, and this is a really interesting story. They're saying that Guru Nanak was sitting there in meditation and his eyes got sewn shut by kids. He didn't do anything. And then when he got up, a while later, he realized his eyes were sewn shut. So he knocked on people's doors and he asked this lady, if you could just pause it for a second. Just for that little break, we were talking about this one story of Guru Nanak's eyes being shut. So he went around knocking on doors because he couldn't see, saying, somebody please open up my eyes. And this one lady came, opened up the eyes, and then because Guru Nanak's face was close by, and they say she used her teeth to take the stitching out, her tilak, which is that tilak is
vermilion.
Vermilion, yeah.
In English.
In English, yeah.
Right.
It's worn on the forehead of ladies.
Yeah, when they're married, right? As a symbol.
When they're married, as a symbol. It rubbed on Guru Nanak's head, and then hers rubbed off a little bit. People scolded her. Somebody said that Guru Nanak was in there for a long time, so he was accused of actually having some sort of affair. Now, people who were mendicants at that time were known to use their position of privilege to sit there and do that type of stuff. And because Guru Nanak was just in that garb at that time, that's what they...
So they accused him of adultery or whatever.
Of adultery with the lady.
With the lady.
The lady got scorned by her family and everybody was mocking her. And she was just... Her reputation went down. She went to Guru Nanak and she goes, look, I helped you, and in helping you, it's ruined my life. Please do something. Guru Nanak turned around and said, okay, there's a gate to your village here. It won't open tomorrow. It'll only open with your hand. So people tried exiting, taking their animals out, bringing them in. This gate wouldn't open. This is a story. What happened was they said, Guru Nanak said, only the hand of that person who's remained faithful to their husband will open this. And the story is that when she opened it, this is what occurred. Now, these were the type of stories which were there to, again, get a point across. And in this one in particular, the way it's been mentioned, they don't mention the Gurbani. It was a story that was mentioned of Guru Nanak at that time because, again, he was seen as that type of figure. So he was one who dealt with that which was beyond the scope of everybody else. Just like these days, when we talk about people who are geniuses, we think of the Rain Man. We'll call people the Rain Man because he's able to remember every card. It's extraordinary abilities. That's what was one of the markings of somebody they deemed to be important. But here's a few other things that people don't know. People who were followers of Guru Nanak's son, Lakshmi Chand, were called Gartaris at that time. That term.
So he had a following?
Yes, Lakshmi Chand's following is still around today. Baba Sarabjot Singh Biddi and that Biddi lineage is from that following. And actually, when you come to my house and you see that picture I've taken, and it's of an octagonal dharamsala, I took that because that was the way the building looked from 1708, and it's still standing. It's in Himachal Pradesh, in Una. That's part of that tradition.
Is that like Sikhism or like
Yeah.
like okay? Oh.
They eventually came. They came into Sikhism during the time of Guru Gobind Singh.
Wow.
Guru Gobind Singh had said to that particular family, everybody else has joined the Khalsa, talking about the previous Gurus. How come you guys haven't joined? And there's a whole story behind that. But then they did join, and then Sahib Singh Biddi, who's an important figure in Sikh history, came from that lineage. And then after that, it's just carried on the way it has. I went to that town and I'd asked the local That time I had a turban beard, and I'd asked the local Hindu merchant, I'm like, oh, where's that Gurdwara? Before he even answered, he closed his eyes, put his hands together, and said, Tan 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 Baba Sahib Singh Bindi. He goes, the Gurdwara's there. And, and it was just, there's this reverence for what that represented, which transcended boundaries, which goes back to that oneness. The way we look at oneness now is, hey, you're this, I'm that, we're all one. But really, no, you're telling me I'm different. There is no otherization in Guru Nanak's view. And he's speaking to people from his view. That's where the learning occurs. You can't know something until you recognize it. So you're being implored to recognize it. And that's what when Guru Nanak's saying, that's how it came about. It says here, in Guru Nanak's time, Guru Nanak was seen as a teacher, right? Or as a mendicant, or as somebody, as a darvish. That was a term that was used for him. But he goes, in Guru Arjan's time, the change happened. People started looking at Guru Nanak as God. This is what Dabastan mentions. You and I had this discussion earlier about in Guru Har Gobind Sahib's time, some of the Sikhs who'd been around for about 2-3 generations and been around earlier Gurus, in front of the Guru would be a little bit standoffish. In one of the instances saying, there's no difference between you and the donkey. And then the Guru would give him a pat on the back. Why? Because he understood Sikhi and he didn't elevate the Guru to a status. That's part of the purpose of these stories, but you'll never hear that anywhere because people aren't willing to.
So talk about that. That's a very interesting thing. So what you're saying is that this change happened during the fifth Guru's time, where the Guru had become. They looked at Guru Nanak not as a like a saintly teacher type thing, but as God itself.
Exactly, and why that happened at that time, if you think about it, is so. Jahangir's memoirs talk about Guru Arjan and say that, and it says he started a shop and now it's getting bigger. And you can't go to any place without people who belong to this guy. I'm saying it in paraphrasing, but what he's pretty much saying was he's starting his own racket. That's what Guru Arjan was accused of by Jahangir. That means he was in a position of prominence. I just shared with you that he had all the farmers in that area who actually looked at him as their guru or as their kind of advocator. Why? Because Guru Arjan had said, don't charge him tax, we're in drought. So they said, hey, I'm a farmer, he's helped me out, I'll follow him. Which is not too different from what you actually see in Punjab right now. That's the way things generally tend to work. But it actually mentions that Nanak's Bani is all about inward addressedness. All a conversation about the mind. It's all about reflection. We talked about Japji Sahib earlier. It talks about Sunye Manye Manakita Pao, which means you listen, you imbibe, and then you test it against your understanding, which means it has to really go in deep, because now that should be shaping how you view the world. It's not a construct where, okay, I kind of believe in that, yeah, I agree. So I subscribe to it. No. If it hasn't changed your being, you're not any closer to it. Then there's a whole thing about the light that I kept mentioning. This is very interesting because this gets brought up, again, from a Persian source. That the light moved from one to another, to another, to another. This goes into the early Islamic Imam philosophy. It's about 150, 200 years ago. Sunnis and Shias came to an understanding of what general Islam is. But prior to that, there were two separate strands that actually had different theologies. And then they kept spreading and breaking. But that this concept of an eternal Imam, that eternal Imam was sometimes referred to as Khizr. In the Jaram Sakhi, they actually talk about, and I'm going to get to this right now, in one of the Jaram Sakhis, the Bala Jaram Sakhi, and it's an interesting point I'm going to mention. There's two versions of that Jaram Sakhi. We talked about earlier.
Is that legit? The Bala Jaram Sakhi?
So,
because I've heard that it's...
there's a lot of things where they believe interpolation came in because they say it came into the Sodis. But what's interesting about it is earlier, and why I'm using it right now. So let's just say, just because they came from the Sordis, does that make it illegitimate? Maybe, maybe not. If a person looks at it from a historical perspective, they can sit there and say, no, it's a lot of myth. But then the question is, what was myth used for? Because metaphors are used in Gurbani. When they're talking about Krishna flying in the air, it's a metaphor, right? It's not, it's referring to a feeling, right? So, but in this Bala Janamsakhi, prior to the British coming in, it was written in Hindui with a lot of Persian in it. And in it, when Guru Nanak meets this one wali, there's one story about Guru Nanak meeting this person. He was actually in Kandahar. He was supposed to be a saint, but he wouldn't let people drink the water. And then he said to Mardana, because Mardana went up the mountain several times, and said, give me water, give me water.
Yeah.
They gave him the name Wali Kandari, but he had a different name prior. And it had the name Dari, I think, which meant that I am one of the beloved. Guru Nanak renamed him as Wali Kandari, meaning you're no longer just beloved to that one. You're part of the whole thing. There's no otherness. Guru Nanak is showing how the otherness went away. In it, he said, are you Khizr? Because Khizr was supposed to be the eternal Imam in one of the views at that time. This is that being that manifests or shows, and in that Janamsakhi, that's what he's referred to. Now, this again is...
So when you mean being, you're talking about something supernatural, right?
According to our understanding right now, because there's no way of looking at it. But think about it this way. Dogs. You have a dog whistle. There are frequencies dogs here that aren't audible to us right now. Maybe there are more latent, like the sixth sense. Maybe there's more latent abilities that we have as humans. And you hear about a lot of cultures, I'm going to say indigenous cultures, being able to sit there and tell how long ago an animal was on this ground, or how far away horses are right now, or what the weather is going to be, because they're so in touch with nature and that oneness. There's a belief generally that as time's gone on, we've been so driven by our senses that we're not attached to the greater oneness. And you see people come out. I mean, these days people will be derogatory and say that they're tree huggers, etc.
So just to go back, so this concept of the eternal Imam.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? Like, what does that mean in terms of is it?
That would be Guru Nanak's Guru. What it's saying is that own God, that they say the one that manifested from within itself. In one of the early translations of Own God, in Garabganj Nudika by Kavi Santokh Singh, he actually quotes something from Sanskrit, Ik Bahom Syam. And I said it incorrectly, but that's how I remember reading it, which pretty much meant oneness from within became many. But it says, that is what I am. So oneness, that is what I am, from which came many. But that oneness from which I am is what we all plug into. And that's the difference, to become a witness to that oneness. It's like when people get a buzz of any sort. As soon as somebody else gets that buzz, they are both connected to that same buzz. They're experiencing it slightly differently, but they can both still attest to it. That's how this is seen. And this story I'm about to share is very interesting because it's from 1647. And I'm going to bring up something that average person doesn't talk about. The tomb of Guru Nanak.
The what?
The tomb of Guru Nanak.
But didn't popular
Dave,
theory.
Please go ahead. Tell us the popular theory.
So the popular theory is that here's what I remember about the story. So when Guru Nanak Dev Ji passed away, they put a sheet over his body, and I believe the next day there was nothing. There was no body.
Right.
And there was like flowers left or something like that.
So what they say is, there were flowers left. One of the other variations of that is, again, so let me finish off that comment.
Yeah, please.
And then we'll get back to this. Yeah. So the Bala Janamsakhi, the earlier version was in Persian and Hindi. Later version was in Punjabi. Why? Because after the colonial interaction, Sikhs then felt that they had to be bound to this language. And they took ownership of it because everybody else stopped taking ownership of it and division started coming up within people. Now, the faith was no longer the experience of these individuals, except for the odd few, but it was pretty much the otherness which came about. It's divide and rule. Why that becomes important is earlier Janamsak goes into the theology, and the audience was a lot wider. If it's written in Persian and Hindi, it means that it's there for everybody from India and everybody from the lowest to the highest, because it covers all languages. When I said Guru Nanak, you didn't need anybody else you didn't need Guru Nanak to be enclosed in an area that Sikhs have done it themselves. That's exactly what's happened right now. Because now they made it so Punjab centrified that the concept of somebody who's outside of Punjab is the other, including us being in the diaspora. There will be at least somebody who's going to say, he's born outside of Punjab, he doesn't know. Whereas being born in Punjab doesn't give you any privilege. Just like Gurbani itself doesn't give you any privilege, because it's not in the language. But the life in that language is what takes people to where they need to get to. So let's go back to this story. It's from a text called Tazkira Bid Hasu. Somebody by the name of Surat Singh, in 1647, he was a Gambol by his background, had gone to the tomb of Guru Nanak in Kartarpur. And when he goes to that tomb, he actually circumambulates it, etc. And they say there are two tombs there. Now this is where the story gets very interesting. While he's there, whoever the attendant is of the place shares the story as per what he had been told prior to 1647. And this has been recorded in 1647. He said that Guru Nanak had two bodies left there. And people were said, okay, we're going to take this body and we're going to bury it. And somebody else said, no, we're going to take the other body and we're going to cremate it. And they say that in that story, it was neither that happened, because when Guru Nanak placed the sheet over himself, as per the original story, he'd left and he met an Afghan on the other side of the river. And the Afghan was a soldier, and he shared stories with him. Guru Nanak gave him fruit, shared a bit of his food. And when he went to Kartarpur, he said, what's the commotion? They said, Guru Nanak has died. And this is what happened. He goes, no, he didn't die. I just spent last night with him. Like, meaning I was there the night before. But regardless of whether that story is true, if it's been misunderstood, it's never mentioned anywhere. So it's never become part of the normal narrative. Just like all those qualities I gave, like Guru Nanak being a linguist. People don't think about that. People don't think about him being a musician. People don't think about him being a political activist. They talk about social activism, but it's only in the context of what we understand today, but not of somebody at that time, right? If you mention it today, he's almost made into a universal secular figure, but he doesn't sit there and deny people's identity. He just sits there and says that those identities, when it comes to the ultimate reality, don't really mean anything. And if you read Gurbani, that's the reflection that I seem to understand from it. Now, what's interesting is Surat Singh also gives his own explanation. So he had the name Singh, but it didn't mean he was Sikh.
Is that tomb around today?
Huh? No. This is the interesting part. So this I got from a book called Sikh History from Persian Sources by J.S. Garewal and Irfan Habib. Both this and the previous story of Dabistan I got from this text. Why I'm sharing this is so anybody in the audience who's interested.
Yeah, well done. Yeah, exactly.
Where to go. So J.S. Garewal and Irfan IRFAN Habib. So in this actual story, they mention that Surat Singh himself was a follower of Bir Hasu, and he used to go and meditate, and he would have mystical experiences with Bir Hasu. But he says that when he went to the grave, there were he saw the two graves and the multiple graves, and somebody walked by, and then that person made the comment to them. Let me see if I've actually got this. He says Surat Singh mentions Bir Hasu and his companions and the miracles, because that person who walked by said, "What's the big commotion about these graves?" And then that person said, "Yes, if a beggar begets treasure, he starts performing like a professional dancer. And then Sut Singh said that this person started speaking in Hindi and gave verses, and that's when he knew it was Guru Nanak. And then when he was in meditation, he had an experience with his own teacher, who he met in spirit. And his own teacher said, that wasn't Guru Nanak, that was me, you didn't see me. But what this actually tells you, if you look at it, because it's 1647, it tells you that Guru Nanak was seen to be somebody who had become one with all the great spirits who joined that oneness. So that concept of you and I are the same comes in there. The whole thing about the light and that light passing on, again, is coming from a different theological perspective that people don't bring into the narrative. So what I'm saying here isn't that there's a likeness more to Islam or less to Islam. I mean, we mentioned the Kartarpur thing earlier, and this is why I'm bringing this aspect up. I'm bringing up the other side that people don't bring up, which is the non-Indic Guru Nanak.
Interesting.
The one who's not fitting what the standard of what they call a saint is. Guru Nanak uses the term Satguru. It's not a term that's there in Indic philosophy. They say Sadguru, like Sadguru Jagi Vasudev Ji. But they don't have Satguru. Guru Nanak defines that. So, what I've done here is explain what Janam Sakhis, which have been used as histories, really are, which is they're another way to give voice to the Gurbani by taking out the voice of anybody else. Number one. Plus, I heard this the other night, and I'm going to mention this. If you want to get something through to somebody, you have to get to their emotions. And when you get to their emotions, it opens them up. Part of that also removes ego out of the way. Gurbani's been written in such a way that if you don't look at Nanak as Nanak being a person, but Nanak as a state of non-duality, nowhere can a person say that they themselves are good. Because you can't be good. That means something's bad out there. But Guru Nanak took all that away. He says, Nanak neech kaha vichar, vare na java ek baar, when he talks about everything that's not right. But he goes, whatever you've done, that is what's correct. And he's referring to the oneness that he stands witness to. So that was essentially what I wanted to bring up. I gave two histories which aren't commonly known. We know that there was a tomb at one time that somebody attested to. And that tomb is no longer there. It's referred to as a Mardi.
Yeah, like a Mardi Masan, we said.
That's exactly what. That's the term that was used there.
So was there? So they didn't even know like an approximate location of it, or?
Yeah, Kartarpur.
So it was there.
It was in Kartarpur. That's why I brought it up.
Wow. Interesting.
I kind of had a feeling that somehow Kartarpur would come up because of
No, just because of today.
So that's why I thought that let's just hold on this.
That's pretty cool.
What I've done in the conversation, just as a recap, is mention the etymology of what Nanak meant, shared how he didn't teach, but rather reflected and allowed everybody to see into what his mind or his heart was saying. The reason it got into the hearts is why the fact that it was referring to what the state of the heart is goes to the strings being pulled on in the heart. The instrument made by Guru Hargobind Sahib was called Dilruba, which meant puller of the heartstrings. Right? Or some people say it came from the Taos, which was shaped as a peacock, but later on it turned into the Dilruba. Some people say during Guru Gobind Singh Ji's time, but more his history shows that it probably happened a lot later.
So you mentioned a few things that were very interesting, especially from the Persian sources.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to ask you was, and again, as we get older and lead family lives and understand the complexities of living like a householder, etc., as we would say, I can imagine that Guru Nanak Dev Ji didn't have quite a family life, in the sense that I know that the current narrative is that he was perfect and life was perfect, but just from a human angle, I wanted to find out from what
Sure.
of history and that is, for example, there's a few things. How was his family life? Because he was always away.
So it's interesting. So I brought Dabistan up, and sorry, I mentioned earlier that I would discuss his family life, and I forgot to mention that point. So even though I'd written it down and it's in my spreadsheet,
all good.
but I'll go into it. Daulat Khan Lodi, right? It's right after they said Daulat Khan Lodi was shocked at Guru Nanak's actions. He said Guru Nanak then decided to leave his family.
How old was he at that time?
I don't know the exact age. It was around the time that he started doing his first Udasi.
Okay.
But they say there's something interesting, and this is something that certain current philosophers do bring up. And again, it can't be said in a way that it attacks people's dogma. They say the state of Bairag, which means disenchantment from the world, was there in Guru Nanak from a very young age.
Yes,
And
that's true.
they say to the point that it could be what some people would deem to be depression these days.
Oh, exactly.
And that's how
But
it's
very, very interesting,
and
right?
I'm not going to mention the scholar who's mentioned this because his philosophical work is beyond, like, it's years. I would even say decades ahead of what anybody's willing to accept. If they were to try to read it right now, it wouldn't make sense. But if you've got a keen eye, you'll pick up on that actually being said directly. That's one aspect. Say Guru Nanak's elder son, his sons, even in the histories, talk about his sons not really being respectful of him. But if you think about it, if your father is deemed to be somebody great, but he hasn't given you time of day, how can you sit there and say, hey, he's great? The story of Baba Sri Chand is that he lived a long time, that he was a mendicant. There are histories that say that Guru Nanak blessed him and said, look, I was here to bring this for the householders, but you're here for the ancient tradition. And they say that Sri Chand.
Okay, okay, good. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
So again, the general narrative we hear is Guru Nanak tested his sons, right, for the guruship, but they didn't listen to him or they didn't respect him, as you're saying. They may have the relationship may have been strained because of his travels, and but on the other side, there is a large group of people who believe in Baba Sri Chand.
Yeah.
And their perspective. So I wanted to get that from actually just from a neutral academic perspective. Sure. Which one would you lean towards? Is that Baba Sri Chand side more accurate? Where, as you said, Guru Nanak Dev Ji said, "Look, you're a yogi. You're meant for the ancient tradition, and you continue that. My mission is a little bit different." Is that accurate? Or is it the traditional narrative where we say, or are they all accurate in a certain way?
You have to go back to when these stories started coming out. The Udasis came to prominence. They were in and out from the Guru's time onwards. We knew Guru Arjan Sahib had actually learned Gurmukhi from an Udasi. We know that's a fact. We know that the Udasis were actually traveling with Guru Gobind Singh Ji when he went into war. He took Udasis with him to Hazur Sahib. He left Anandapur Sahib, which was like his home, in the care of an Udasi Gurmukh Das. In his own writings, he mentions in Bangani Ki Yod how one of the Udasis had come and said, I'm going to fight. The thing is, the Udasis have been part of the history. The thing is, they also controlled history for a while. And they controlled shrines. And then, with the onset of the Bolshevik Revolution and other revolutions where resistances were there against traditions, they were one of the first people who were also attacked. What started happening during the British time was Sikhs started having these agitations saying, these people are just sitting there, they got control of what we have our faith in, and they're doing stuff that's bad, like raping women and exploiting people. That probably did occur in order for it to become something that had an uprising. It probably did occur. But does that mean every Udasi was like that? No. But if you talk to the people who are scholars in history, they'll say, no, these people were super, super important. Our pictures have them. Earliest pictures from 1839 onwards have pictures of Udasis actually at Darbar Sahib.
So just for the benefit of some of our listeners, can you give a brief description of the Udasi Panth and who they are?
Sure. They're followers of Baba Sri Chand, who was the son of Guru Nanak. his name keeps coming up in a lot of the histories because they say that he was against his father's guruship, and it's only in the fourth guru's time that he learned the humility that was there. But if you look at what history also shows us, they were also Dasis as a group were mendicants, but their engagement with the world was to teach Gurbani, was to teach how to live in non-duality. So they took on the roles the original nuts would have in the villages.
You mean the Nath
yogis?
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
Because they were big in Punjab and other places.
Wow.
And if you
so there were teachers.
they would be educators of sorts. Now, what makes this kind of interesting is if you look at Guru Gobind Singh Ji's time, we have many stories of traditions that Guru Gobind Singh Ji just patted people on the back and said, nope, you continue on with your tradition. He's like, let's all be connected, but you carry on the way you are. If in Guru Gobind Singh Ji's time, we have multiple histories of that actually occurring, kind of makes me wonder if the whole narrative that everybody was supposed to be the exact same way as it's been preached now is even true.
I've heard that part of the Dasi movement, or what Baba Sirichan tried to do, was he tried to unite all the sadhus of India.
Yeah.
And another thing was to get rid of occult or black magic practices. I'm not sure if that. I've heard that, but I'm
could be
not
part
sure.
of the proletization when people are going to sit there and say that. Because when you believe in a non-dual oneness, then you're focused...
And non-dual, yeah. So the three things I heard was to unite the sadhus of India, to bring a focus back on that non-dual oneness versus demigods and goddesses and stuff. Yeah. And then the third one was against, black magic.
So the second and third one there actually match in because a lot of these practices occur by focusing on different deities.
Yeah, correct.
So the oneness being manifested, your energy goes towards something.
Yeah.
And you pictured it being daunting. This is kind of how it occurs. What's interesting is if you take that same lens and look at Guru Gobind Singh Ji's Barni, right, in Dasam Granth and even Sarablo, you'll notice how these energies are depicted in certain ways to leave an impression on the mind. And they'll give the most horrific, demon or being. And then they talk about how that oneness still destroys it because the oneness doesn't have an end or beginning. Right? It's like that one ring to rule them all.
Yeah, that's right.
That's the same
Very interesting.
thing. So based on what you just shared there, that's in line with what Guru Nanak said. All I'm saying is that the tradition of multiple seats of authority was a non-issue because Guru Nanak wasn't out there to create authority. Guru Nanak created communities. Siri Chand did not create a community. He had followers, but it was in a very different way.
And Baba Lakshmi Das, the other son, he just continued with Guru Nanak Dev Ji's teaching?
Essentially, yes. I don't have much knowledge about the Kartaris, but I do know that in Guru Gobind Singh Ji's time, Guru Gobind Singh said to the Bidis, how come you haven't joined? They said, we heard your Biddi killer. And it turned out that there was somebody who was pretending to be a Biddi that Guru Gobind Singh beat up. And Guru Gobind Singh said, no, I beat him up because he was pretending to be a Biddi. And when they realized that that's what Guru Gobind Singh said, they're like, we apologize. What do you want from us? He goes, join the Khalsa? And they go, okay, and we'll come to Anandpur. And he goes, no. They said, we'll come to Anandpur. And he goes, yeah, please feel free to. And they said, actually, it's better that we don't because people respect us. And if we do that in Anandpur, they're going to show us more respect and create a division in your kingdom.
Now, this is another question I had. In Guru Nanak Dev Ji's time, how many followers were there of his?
See, this is a very interesting aspect. We're not sure if he even had followers.
Hey, that's why I ask.
Yeah,
that's exactly why I'm asking.
Two theories. There's one theory that his first follower and his first initiation was Guru Angad Dev Ji. And then all the tests he put everybody into was to see who would be willing to be his follower. We brought this up the other day. He acted like he was crazy at one point to push people away. It was the mental resolution. It was to see who actually sees the non-duality.
So is it so that story is true then that he would preach in cemeteries and
so here's the question:
like that?
Is it true or was it something in the Janam Sakhis? Which you see, what I'm imploring people to do is go back and actually read the Janam Sakhis. I'm saying Why were they created? They weren't created for some man to sit on a stage to tell you something. I was talking to a friend of mine who thought Gurstak ki jot pargat hoi from Aarti means listen to the stories of the gurus. Well, when Guru Nanak said it, there were no Janam Sakhis, there were no stories about him. And according to one of the older schools of thought, Guru Nanak did not bow down or applaud his own stories because he knew it came through him and his body, the Barney or that non-dual state of mind was kept pure. That's why it's kept in words. While you're in the body, you're subject to flaws.
So this is a great segue.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to ask, so I want to talk about this a bit.
Please.
And again, you can apply this to, any kind of spiritual leader
Sure.
or prophet or that.
Sure.
Again, the narrative that we hear today is when we think of the gurus, we think of them as perfect beings.
Sure.
I'm not sure at this stage if, as human beings and as you grow in life, you realize how human beings and life is a lot of gray. It's not really black and white, right? So what you've shared with the ancient Persian sources, which is interesting, is how almost, I guess, over time, from human being to kind of a godly being, right?
Yeah.
Like over time. So the question is that,
and on that note, based on what we discussed last time and before, I'd give me about 2-3 stories of people challenging Guru Har Gobind Sahib in one way or another.
yeah, exactly.
But they were also from the old school.
Yeah.
So just think, you and I, let's say we believe in certain rules, or we believe things are supposed to be a certain way, and then a new wave of people come by who are like around us, but somehow they're now more numbers. We're gonna hold to our guns, especially if we're in touch with that reality. Sorry, go ahead.
So it was actually not even much of a question versus kind of a comment.
Yeah.
That it's interesting how over time things change.
So
Right.
here's what I say about that. When you can have a subscription. I'm going to use a gym subscription, right? Or a membership. I can get a membership to a gym and tell everybody I go, and that's the gym I'm part of. I like it for this reason, that reason. It's better than your gym. But if I'm not actually in the gym and it's not obvious that my lifestyle shows that I've got a gym going lifestyle, so if the proof isn't in the pudding, people will not believe you. All right? What's happened is people, as soon as movements get big, are all about the membership and less about the actual work. Whereas if you read what Guru Nanak is saying, he's imploring people to rise above all that and become aware of that oneness. And how does he describe that oneness? Even in Indian thought, many people become Bhagwans, and then everybody worships them as the beer and doer. And if I come from that type of background and Guru Nanak's name comes up, obviously in my mind or out of my own kind of Shraddha, or which, like what's a common terminology for Shraddha in English? Can you tell me? I forgot.
It's kind of a worshipful respect.
Worship. Okay.
Like, as you know, you can't translate, but the closest thing is kind of a Shraddha is used as a faith / worship.
And it's interesting, and I'm asking you for that because when I look at Shraddha, I look at how it's translated in the Vedantic text, which means that you take what you've heard from your teacher as the truth, meaning that becomes the
basis of faith.
Or basis of, that's your touchstone of truth. But based on Shraddha, you're going to want to make something relatable to you. Because if it's not relatable, how are you even going to connect? I think that's part of the larger thing. So when I'm looking at Janam Sakhis, I'm saying, don't look at Janam Sakhis as points of history. You're doing it all wrong. That's colonial thinking. That's come to your mind because colonial masters came in and said, if you don't have a history, you aren't enlightened people and you don't have God's providence over you. Why was that big for them? Because Western thought was time starts, time ends. And you're always going to this upward progression. Indic thought, and
Very different.
Even old Shia thought talked about Tanasuk, which actually refers to reincarnation. There are talks that that was actually expunged from the thought, but old Persian thoughts, not Persian, Shia thought also had a concept of maksh. You know, maksh is descending into a lower life form like an animal.
Interesting.
So these concepts were there. It's just as narratives came together and people solidified and started rearranging where the fences were, things changed.
So I want to ask you an interesting question. You kind of talked about it. It was a very interesting point before. Well, there was a lot to cover. Guru Nanak Dev Ji and his guru.
Yeah.
So there are certain traditions that believe that he had a guru.
Sure.
Some people even say Guru Kabir Ji, let's say, right?
Sure.
Or whoever. You mentioned something interesting of this concept of the eternal Imam and or this kind of eternal universal type being, right? So as from your, I guess, academic standpoint, from what you've seen and all that, what's the whole thing?
Okay, so I'm going to go to the Kabir one. This one, I believe Guru Nanak and Kabir met. Okay, there is historical evidence from the Kabir Bantis. There are dohe which were written in Hindi, but the Kabir Bantis, even 100 years after, and it was like great grandnephew of Kabir, actually went back to Gurbani to validate that against the Barney they had. Kabir Bantis even now they've got those dohes and all that, but internally they revere the Gurbani even more. What's interesting is the language that's used for Kabir Barney within Guru Granth Sahib, which is Granth actually means collection, tied in a knot.
That's what Granth means?
Yeah.
Wow, interesting.
Right?
A collection. Yeah, because books were
tied in a knot.
Tied in a knot. Interesting.
So they're all brought together. Now, if Guru Nanak had met Kabir, there's a small segment of people who've brought this narrative back to life. It existed, but it's not the common narrative. There's one or two narratives that are running all of Sikhism right now, and they're all religious based, and they're either based on trying to be so inclusive of the larger Indian thought that it's a bit of a mishmash of everything. And then there's another one, which is trying to make it so modern and rationalist. But what's happened is it's just taken more of that communist kind of approach and super highly practical, and it's all about the Protestant work ethic. And there's that view where you're just trying to be the most ethical, moral person in the world, right? So you've got these multiple kind of stories or viewpoints. One of the viewpoints says that the gurus met all of the bhagats, and the evidence which is shown is they've got the person who's done all this, Gyani Dit Singh, and it's Gyani Gurdit Singh who wrote Mera Pind. He had gone, his research showed that he went to each one of the sects that were there afterwards, looked at their texts, and their texts refer to Guru Nanak meeting their predecessor. Each one of them. And I've sent you that before. The thing is, Kabir's language changed to Guru Nanak's language. How did somebody from Banaras start speaking Punjabi if they met twice? Now, there's a whole other theory that they didn't meet, and that could have been collections of the poems, because Kabir Pantis were actually up and around in that area, and that things were changed in the vernacular, and some people say that was the Barney that was collected, etc. That's one point. But the biggest one is when Guru Nanak was asked who his guru was, and he goes, Parabrahm, Aparampar Parabrahm Parmeshwar Nanak Ka Gur Soi. That my guru is the one that's beyond everything. He wasn't referring to a person. Also, if the other gurus use Guru Nanak as their guru, and they used his name as their the Khallas, his name, or their kind of namesake, instead of saying Angad, it was said Nanak was used. What does that say about Guru Nanak if he can't even use his own guru's name? There's this one of Santarin being his guru.
That's the one I've heard of.
So this was propagation by the Udasis. And they say Sant Rain was an Udasi, and Guru Nanak became his Udasi Jilla. Because for the Udasis, if you don't have, all knowledge came from Brahm. Brahm's 4 sons were witnesses to that knowledge. To them, they believe that from that point onwards, enlightenment could only come through one of those lineages. And then you'd have to live multiple lifetimes to then become a brahmacharya, which means a person who's a celibate, a mendicant. You'd have to experience everything to the point that you've only come here again to get the highest, purest teaching. So those people initially would say, yes, we validate Guru Nanak because he's part of this tradition. And that's why he had to leave his family. And that's how they validate it. But then, when Sikhs stepped up, they turned around and said, well, Guru Nanak didn't have a guru. And they're those same people who wrote that 100 years ago, right now, and you can just go across the street to Sangalwara Khara from Darbar Sahib. Go in there, pick up any of their literature. Stuff written by Swami Nandanand. All pretty much says, Guru Nanak, Buddha, Mahavir Jain, they're not really legit because they didn't have gurus.
Oh, interesting.
The same people. He is the head. He was the head of the Udasis, of the Barda Karna.
Interesting.
So his authority now said this is incorrect. But why did this occur? Because Udasis had to validate who they were as soon as powers changed. So there's that aspect. But if Guru Nanak's own writings say that, we're either saying Guru Nanak's a liar, because that's what we're assuming. And like I said, the other inference here is, was Guru Nanak not an integral person with integrity? If all of his followers, whose light traveled all the way through, and this is said in the Guru's own Bani, it's said by the Partisaveye, or in Guru Granth Sahib, and it's written in Guru Gobind Singh's Bani, and it's said by Bhai Nand Lal. Nearly every source that's considered legit talks about this. So.
Wow, fascinating.
And Guru Gobind Singh, we're talking about that eternal Imam type thing. Again, I don't want to put that twist on it because it's actually common in multiple cultures. Satguru is what's being referred to here. Satgur mera sada sada, na ave na jaye. And my Satgur is the one that doesn't come and go. People in bodies come and go. You can sit there and say, oh, you can flip it around. But then you can do that. You can negate to what the Satgur is. Or when Guru Gobind Singh says, Ad ant ikyat tara, soi guru samjho hamara. From the beginning to the end, there's this oneness which is manifested itself. Consider that to be my Guru. All of a sudden, the stories of Guru Tegh Bahadur being his Guru isn't necessarily there.
It's interesting.
Like, what do? Do you take the narrative? Like the Najat, right? The farmer who exemplifies in Indian kind of thought how much just pure blind faith or pure conviction can get you to one of the highest stages. But when you read Gurbani, it doesn't talk about the stone that he manifested God through. It actually talks about him being in the state of non-duality. Him being in the state of no name. So
Phenomenal. And what first of all, congratulations, I guess to all of our Sikh brothers and sisters and the Sikh world, 500, 50 years, right? And especially, now there's a corridor, so people have pilgrimage, right? But I mean, everything you've studied now as an academic and as a believer and everything like that. If there's kind of like an essence, or what is the biggest takeaway that I guess people could take away from Guru Nanak Dev Ji's life, or something we can implement? What would that be for you?
critical self-reflection. Critical self-reflection, because all of Gurbani, unless you can relate to that last line of non-duality, you don't understand what you're reading. Because what's happened even with Gurbani, we've had this discussion, is something's brought up either in a conversation or some feeling has been sung about. But it only gets validated right at the end, when in that state of non-duality, the final kind of thing is said, like the last or the last feeling. So that's what I would take. I would say self-determination, empowerment, all this comes from self-reflection. Because Ikom God, one, which I am, manifests. So you'd have to know what you are in order for you to manifest.
That was beautiful.
So that's what I take.
I mean, we could probably go on forever, but that was beautiful. And once again, I wanted to thank you so much for your time and your research. And for any of our listeners who would like to talk to you more, maybe go into depth with further questions, is there an email or number, any way, like the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, my personal email is Harminder Mann, HARMINDER, Mann, MANN, @gmail.com.
Excellent.
And all they have to do, please put DD Podcast in your title. And if you do like what I've said, also please post it on social media, on your Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. You can hashtag, do whatever you want, but get it out there if you feel that it's got you to think about things in a certain way. Again, I was just trying to bring another light, and I'm giving certain, where I was explicit in my opinion or my judgments, I did it to get people to kind of get out of their comfort zone about what they're used to thinking about when they think of Guru Nanak. Because if you don't allow yourself to see more, you're actually creating that square peg and you're trying to fit holes into it.
And very well said. And I'm really glad you mentioned that the intent of our podcast is, obviously we both of us are believers in the Sikh faith, and we look at Guru Nanak Dev Ji in a very holy way, reverent way. But that was the purpose, exactly. I wanted to bring, like you said, a different viewpoint, or not even different as much as a viewpoint that you don't really hear about unless you were to do the research and go in deep. Right?
I want to share something about that. Pete, I mentioned how Guru Nanak's, and I don't want to use the word proletizer, but the person who actually took care of, who was responsible for certain areas. One of them was actually a known atheist.
Wow.
How could you be an atheist and then a follower of the one?
Yeah.
One.
Interesting.
Generator, operator.
Harry's a comedian, by the way. So.
Now you got to take life lightly, but I was going to say, how could that be the case? There's something that's a reality beyond the construct of God, and all the constructs of God are mentioned within the Granth, Guru Granth Sahib.
Excellent. Well, hey, brother, once again, thank you so much. Yeah. It was very enlightening. I mean, we could do so many podcasts and so many on different topics. I really hope everyone enjoyed this. And you can always get a hold of me via Facebook, messaging me, or if you'd like to email me, you can reach me on Davinder, DAVINDER _Danoa, DHANOA @yahoo.com. And would love your feedback. Good, bad, whatever it is. If you didn't like something, we'd love to hear about it as well. Totally. But we're lucky to live in a place in the world where we have freedom of expression, freedom of speech, and such a holy time for us as Sikhs, and such a wonderful time and to see the developments of what's happening. So this was kind of our humble tribute this night, of November 9th in the Western Hemisphere, while in India already the celebrations and everything have taken place. So thank you so much. God bless. Have fun, live life. And the first episode of season 2. Yeah, this is it. Thank you so much. Thanks for tuning in to the Double D Podcast. See you next time.